Tonight we have a special edition of our usual monthly fireside chats, in that we are going to showcase who I consider to be some champions of ecological forest management in the Pacific Northwest. We've invited 10 members of the Northwest Natural Resource Group to share some anecdotes from their own small woodlands. And we've got a really interesting collection of folks that range from small family-owned forests, small businesses, counties, community forests. Let's see, we have land trust. So they represent a real kind of interesting cross-section of the types of forest owners that are both members of NNRG and who we work with across the Pacific Northwest. And so what I've asked each of these folks to do is provide about a 5-minute introduction to who they are, their small woodlands, share an anecdote or two. Really, it's they can get a free range with this topic and share with us whatever they like. And it's a great opportunity for us all just to sit back and hear some stories and hopefully gain a little bit of inspiration from other fellow forest practitioners out there. So with that, I'm going to open it back up. And Mark and Beth, again, if you're comfortable going first, would love to hear from you and about your beautiful forest near Shelton.
Thanks, Kirk. So I'm Mark, and this is Beth, and we're Stillwater's Farm, just north of Shelton, south of Union, above the Skokomish River, just south of the Hood Canal. We have a 48-acre tree farm. We live on our tree farm, and we've owned it since 1990, and we've lived here since 1996. It's mostly Douglas fir. We have kind of two age cohorts. One's about 130 years old. One's about 60 years old. But the dominant feature of our tree farm is a 20-acre wetland system that we've taken a lot of pride in trying to restore to its natural function. This wetland system was drained in the 1930s and again in the 1960s. And putting the hydrology back and trying to enhance the functions of the wetland system have been not only challenging, but also very rewarding. Our management objectives are to enhance the wildlife habitat here on the farm, to diversify the forest, to share our resource with others, and to provide a home place for us and our dog and our cat. We have just come back from Spokane, where we were honored to be nominated as State Tree Farmers of the Year. Unfortunately, we ran into a behemoth in John Henriksen, who was selected and richly deserved his selection, and will be a great ambassador for tree farmers and land managers and stewards into the future. I'd like to be able to share my screen if I can. I'm going to try it one more time, Kirk, and see if I can get the pictures up. I'm not sure why it's not photos. Doesn't.
I can do my best to share it for you, Mark.
Okay, give it a shot, Gabby. Maybe I can narrate it. This video was produced by the Washington State Tree Farm System, American Tree Farm System Selection Committee. They had a professional videographer come out, spend a day out here with us, put us through the hoops, gave us new appreciation for movie stars. But But the best part was the videographer just did a super job of editing out all the stammering and stuttering and mistakes, and really made for a nice video. But this is showing some of the hardwoods. This is our one of our fish-bearing outlet streams, the beaver dam that controls the hydrology of the wetland, some drone shots over the wetland. This is our open water lens of the system. Beth's talking about all the wildlife around here. We look out over our porch over the wetland system. We have about 25 large boxes for wood ducks and hooded mergansers, and about 50 smaller boxes for chickadees and swallows, that sort of thing. Took us 7 years to get a permit to unditch the wetland. The beavers came back in 1 year and did it for us. Had a project with NRCS to build habitat piles, and they've turned out great. They're really heavily used. Building boxes, there's some wood duck boxes, hooded merganser. That box I built in 1994 at Camp Pendleton, it's the most popular box we've had. It's 35 years old. It gets used every year. The bat rocket box. Pollinator garden. If I could get my screen to work, I'd show you the beetle bank we built last year with Mason Conservation District, insect habitat. Brought in 5 yards of garden soil, a bunch of cedar logs, some rocks, a stump, planted about 30 or 40 different perennial plants for pollinators, bees, butterflies, hummingbirds. You let them grow and flower, they provide forage, nectar, and then you don't knock it down in the fall. You let it stand as insect habitat, and I guess it's a good thing for pollinators and bugs. That was Tom Terry, our tree farm inspector, and who nominated us for Tree Farmer of the Year. He's a great guy. Ran the Weyerhaeuser Science Center in Chehalis for about 30 years. These are some shots of groups we've had out here in the past. The day of the video, we had a bunch of bird watchers here on the porch. So they got to star in the movie as well. And here we are talking about our legacy plans. And we did some stammering and stuttering about that. This is what we called saw quality pine. A guy named Jim Freed, an extension forester from WSU, noted that tree as saw quality pine and led us to consider harvesting a bunch of that pine, turning it into flooring and trim and cabinets, and we used it on the interior construction of our house. Turned out real well. Here we are walking for the camera. Pointing out dead trees, I think. Now we're talking about legacy plans, which we don't have. So we're trying to figure that out. That's probably priority one around here, is to try to come up with some strategy for keeping this property in the condition that it's in sustainably, and passing it along to the next generation somehow. Well, thanks, Gabby, for getting that running.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Mark and Beth. And yeah, apologies that we couldn't get the audio to go along with that. What we can do for folks that do want to see the video with the audio, we'll put the link to it in the chat. Gabby, if you're able to do that, I'd sure appreciate it. That's up on the web, and people can click on that after the fireside chat and take another look at that video. It's really, really well done. Again, thanks, Mark and Beth. Appreciate you sharing with us. So we're going to pivot from a family-owned forest to a community forest, the Nisqually Community Forest to be specific. And I would like to introduce Marco Pinchot, the relatively newish executive director for the Nisqually Community Forest. Marco, if you are out there, we would love to hear from you and what's going on at the NCF.
Yeah, great. Well, I spent the whole day up in the woods today, so uh, hiking up steep hills. So I'm pretty tired right now, but glad to be here. Yeah, my name's Marco Pinchot. I guess Kirk and the board of the Nisqually Community Forest hired me about I don't know, 14 months ago, maybe something like that. So uh, relatively new, I suppose, still, but got my feet under me. Um, So for those of you who don't know, the Nisqually Community Forest is a 5,500 acre working forest that is half owned by our nonprofit. Nisqually Community Forest is a 501c3 subsidiary of the Nisqually Land Trust. And then the other half of the land is owned by the Nisqually Indian Tribe. And we manage the entire 5,500 acres under one kind of cooperative agreement that and using kind of the same methods across the landscape. And what I guess one thing that kind of makes this community forest unique is that that connection to the tribe and sort of the origin story of how the community forest came about out of the work that was being done by the Nisqually tribe with the Nisqually River Council and sort of the conservation strategy along the watershed all the way from the Billy Frank Jr. National Wildlife Refuge on Puget Sound and all the way to Mount Rainier, and how conserving along the river for salmon recovery, they kind of came, or folks came to realize that really the headwaters was this missing link, that the headwaters were still being managed under clear cutting protocols that were not necessarily great for the salmon and for cold, clean water coming out of, in particular, the Busy Wild, which is the largest tributary of the Michelle, which is the largest fish-bearing tributary of the Nisqually, and which connects to the Nisqually below the Alder Lake Dam. So as far as fish, it's a really critical sub drainage of the Nisqually. And so the strategy that Kirk, as a founding board member, and the folks at the tribe and folks at the Land Trust and at the River Council, and Joe Kane from the Land Trust was really kind of the leader of the group. Started acquiring property outside of Ashford, and kind of between Ashford and Eatonville, that had been previously managed by it had changed hands, but it was Weyerhaeuser for a long time, and then Hancock, and then Hampton, so purchasing lands in different sections with the main goal, the initial main goal being producing more cold, clean water for salmon. So can we change the forestry practices specifically to produce cold, clean water? And I guess that as far as really exciting stuff that's going on right now, it's that work with the leadership of NNRG and as our contract forester and with the leadership of the tribe is really kind of getting to a really exciting point where we have funding now to install a long-term hydrology study. There's a hydrology model called the Velma model that was originally partially calibrated in the Michelle and in the Busy Wild, and that NNRG obviously has been using for a long time to guide how ecological thinning can be used to produce more cold, clean water. And now we have funding to basically install in-water flow and temperature sensors, as well as temperature and soil moisture across the landscape, so that as we do different practices of ecological thinning, do our snow gap studies, do various different densities of thinnings and other techniques that will hold more water on the landscape. Does it actually work? That's really the question. We have these theories, but can we actually use use adaptive management and learn from what the data is showing us and change how we are doing what we see as ecological forestry as a restoration tool? Can we use that and actually show real results of more cold, clean water later into the spawning season for Chinook and steelhead? There are other great co-benefits that come out of this. I mean, obviously, the one of the most important ones for us is the tribe having access to the upper watershed to exercise treaty rights, to do hunting and gathering. That's a critical part of why we are doing this as well. Being led by the Nisqually tribe as the lead entity for salmon recovery. But we've just gotten to this really exciting place where, on Friday, I'll be installing the first in-water sensors for flow and for temperature, and then on Monday we did a steelhead survey with the tribal biologists. So we're really, I think, at a point now where pretty soon we're going to be able to show how these practices, do or do not produce more cold, clean water in sort of a really definitive way. So I think that's something I'm really excited about. It's what I was out in the forest working on today, and what I'll be back up there on Friday. And of course, we couldn't do it without NNRG. Chase is the forester who works with me up there. He was up there with me today. I know he also works with a number of other landowners, and before that, it was Jal, and then of course Kirk, as the sort of leader of the forestry team, has sort of driven the strategy since the founding of the Nisqually Community Forest. So, Kirk, if there's anything else you'd like me to address, we have a lot of different projects going on right now, and we have some very ambitious thinning schedule both on the tribe's property and on the nonprofit property, and as well as the adjacent land trust. Mount Rainier Gateway. So lots going on this summer, and just a really exciting time for the Nisqually Community Forest.
Awesome. Thanks, Marco. Really appreciate that. It's a great overview of where we're at currently. Appreciate it. We're going to pivot now to a small family-owned business based down in the Centralia, Chehalis area. Richard and Debra Pine, I hope you still have enough time to spend with us here. I know you've got a pressing obligation coming up in a few minutes, but with the time you have, we would love to hear from you and what you're doing with the O'Neill Pine Company.
Well, thank you for moving us up in the program. Appreciate that. We're on 45 different locations between Toledo and Tenino. We covered about 2,200 acres, and all of our properties are within 5 miles of I-5.
Oh, my turn. Okay. Well, I want to just share something kind of unique about our land. Not so much about how it might be affecting the trees or learning about the soil or the water, but our youngest daughter went to a graduate program in forensic anthropology at the University of Boston several years back. And when it came time for her to work on her thesis, she decided to go to the powers that be and ask if she could not conduct some scientific research in taphonomy, the study of decomposition, on the West Coast. There's a lot of data and a lot that is done on the East Coast in terms of that, but there's not a lot on the West Coast. So she convinced them that we had land, and she could procure the necessary things to do that with. And so they granted her to be able to do that. So we spent one summer gathering some pigs and cages and weather stations and a bunch of other stuff in order for her to do that on our land. And that's not a typical use of forest land, but we thought that was a great opportunity to add to the scientific research. And we also gathered a bunch of bones and skulls from our property and sent those back to be used in their teaching labs at the University of Boston. So that's kind of just a unique thing that we've done on our property.
We have appreciated being a charter member of the NNRG certified group, and it means for us we are always learning. Like, we used to be able to pass by holly on our property and not think much of it until Kirk started talking about holly being the second coming of Scotch broom. And now I can't pass a holly bush without dealing with it and saying, oh, that Kirk Hansen, he's always helping me learn something.
So we've been cutting down some holly. I think I'll just also share one of my early experiences when we were out in the woods. We had done some replanting on a property, and I was sent off to check on how those little trees were doing. And I walked along under some other trees, came to this patch, and as I was perusing those trees, I heard some rustling in the bushes ahead of me. And I thought, oh, well, probably just a deer or something. And so I just kept on. And as I got a little closer, I started hearing thumping on the ground. And that began to worry me just a bit. And I kept going, though. And then I heard more stomping and more snorting. And I thought, oh, my gosh, what is on that other side of that hedge? And I did not take the time to find out. I turned around and hightailed it back to the truck. But that's not discouraged me from going out in the woods. So
thanks for the chance to share, Kirk.
All right. Thanks, Richard and Debra. So I trust, Debra, you walk softly and carry a big stick now when you're in the woods?
I just keep my eyes open.
There you go. All right. Appreciate you two joining us. Thanks again. All right, so now we're going to reach down into the southern extent of NNRG's territory, down into Oregon, Benton County to be specific. And I've got the pleasure to introduce Adam Stebbins, the county forester for Benton County. And we started working with them, gosh, it's probably been about 7 years or so. Adam, what can you share about Benton County?
Thanks, Kirk. And thanks, everyone. I'm learning a lot. I can tee it up if you want to get those slides ready that I sent, or I can share those slides too.
Yeah, if you want to go ahead and share if you've got them on your end, you bet.
Yeah, whatever's easiest. So yeah, like Kirk said, I'm the natural resources coordinator overseeing our forestry. We have about 1,300 acres in the NNRG certification for FSC lands. And prior to the county holding the certificate, one of our forestry consultants held the certificate before that. So for FSC, so we've been FSC for as long as we've owned various forest lands. And Rowan helped me a couple years back. We added 113 acres. Marco was talking about some of the interesting Chinook and salmon work. We added about 113 acres on the South Fork of the Alsea River, which is a major spawning, rearing, just very highly active spawning and rearing for Chinook and coho. So that's been a great addition, and doing some forest work around that and retaining riparian buffers. So we have a lot of threatened and endangered species. We have Taylor's checker spot butterfly. We have Finder's blue butterfly in meadow complexes within the forest units. I can show you kind of an overview of how we do things here. Share my screen somehow. Here we go. Share. Everyone see the first
You
slide
got it.
there?
You bet.
Yeah.
Success.
So yeah, we do a lot of cool stuff. prairies, forests, streams, all the good stuff. This kind of just, I thought it might be useful for the group when we did our forest stewardship plan, how we tackled developing our resource management units. It was a new approach for us. The prior plans had looked more at management actions and age classes, whereas this is looking at more a sensitivity class, and that involves everything from slopes to old growth habitat to proximity to wetlands and streams. So that really helped set us up in 20 to come up with these sensitivity classes and then really hone in on what our management units would look like as far as harvest. We harvest on average from all the properties combined around 500,000, give or take, board feet. So pretty decent chunk. Douglas fir and clearing out white fir. These are kind of what the management units look like, and this is the new one we added, which was McBee. You can see the South Fork of the Alsea River there, and properties on both sides. Plus, we inherited a campground. So in January, when I didn't have any rain, luckily we pretty much redressed and recreated all of the camping pads right outside of the riparian buffer. So it's going to be a 40+ campground, a working forest, old growth forest on the far east side, and we did various thinnings and patch cuts on the west side. So a pretty cool addition for sure. Some of the kind of shots of what we did. Giant pool where a lot of the spawning and rearing happens in November. This is kind of our crown jewel. This is Bazell Memorial Forest outside of Philomath, Oregon, in a beautiful area called Kings Valley. So about 200 acres of upland meadow with threatened and endangered species where millions of dollars have been spent by Fish and Wildlife Service and others to restore meadow quality, reduce encroachment from Douglas fir over time, basically restore and expand and seed and plant all of the TNE for endangered Taylor's checker spot and other butterflies predominantly, but also to just preserve the habitat. All of our meadows at that location, minus a couple small ones, are in a habitat conservation plan that is countywide, that I'm in charge of managing at about a dozen different sites. This is the management units for that site, sensitivity classes. So you can see in the red, these are kind of the no-touch zones. We have old growth. Then you have more of the commercial harvest locations in yellow and lighter green. We actually just executed a pretty massive thinning that I didn't recommend to do. This is in a trust. So all of the proceeds stay at the site, which is good. They don't get rolled up into our general fund. But I knew with the way the market is and the cost, it wasn't going to be that good. And it turned out to not be that good, but it got it off of the schedule. So it is what it is. Another example of opening up oak woodlands. This was from about 10 years ago at our Fort Hoskins site, where we had a bunch of Doug fir that had been planted inside of what used to be mixed oak woodland, upland prairie, and we've reseeded that and it's come back beautifully, and there's a trail system through there. These are the management units. You can see now it's this beautiful oak meadow. And then we have a Civil War era fort down here. We have Victorian style houses from early pioneers down here. Trail systems, meadows, very, very diverse site as well. And then our last site is Fitton Green, which is actually the only site that I've never managed a timber operation on in my 18 years with the county. It's just a very steep, very small diameter, a lot of die off, low elevation die off. So it's not easy, especially with a lot of neighbors and a shared road system in there. But a goal is to figure out some sort of grant to make that one happen because it's way overdue, and we're losing some quality oak pockets in there. It's very interesting. You can see this giant southern meadow. This is where most of the Doug fir is, along with these green patches as you move north up that corridor. So kind of gives you the highlights of our FSC, and appreciate learning. I got to attend more of these, that's for sure. I appreciate the invite.
Yeah, you bet, Adam. Thanks for that. No, it's really inspiring to see the innovative forestry that a county agency is doing for such a high public use, high visibility areas. It's, I think, a fantastic opportunity for the public to see, again, innovative, ecologically based forestry in action. So really admire and appreciate what you're doing down there in Benton County. So we're going to bring it back a little closer to my home, Olympia, Washington, and back with a small family-owned forest owner. I'd like to introduce Paul and Peggy Butler, who together manage about 80 acres adjacent to the Capitol Forest. Paul and Peggy, we'd love to hear from you. And thanks for joining us.
Okay, thank you. Well, as you said, we refer to our forest as the Butler Family Forest, and it is adjacent to Capitol Forest in northwest Thurston County. And you don't need to know where this property line is to tell the difference between our ecologically managed forest and DNR's industrial forest. This has proved really useful over the years because one of the things that we stress is education. And we've been working for many years with the Evergreen State College where I used to teach. And we have had student interns working out there. And I'm excited now. I just met with an instructor from Black Hills High School near Tumwater. And they're doing this youth engaged with sustainable systems, and they're going to come out and visit our forest this summer as part of their summer internship program. So it just adds a new dimension to our activities. The other thing we're really interested in is improving forest health. So a lot of the management that we do is what I call worst first commercial thins, where we get rid of weak and overstocked trees and replant and try to improve the forest health, also considering what might be going on with climate change. So the location of our forest, which is so close to Olympia and the Evergreen State College and also proximal to DNR land, really sets us up nicely. We're also right at the edge of the maximum extent of the Puget lobe of the Cordilleran ice sheet. And so we see evidence of glacial activity, and it has a big impact on the local topography of our site. And as a former geologist, it's sometimes distracting to think about the geology more than the forest, but I'm managing to do both now. I think probably the most interesting experience we had was the first time we did a harvest back in about 2009. We ended up getting almost over 10 inches of rain in 48 hours, and the easement to our property had a 3-foot culvert which overnight became a chasm 25 feet wide and 15 feet deep. The landowner wasn't able to do anything to replace that road because he had other ways of getting to his house. And so we ended up taking on the building of a bridge. And to do that, we did a timber harvest of 8 acres of mature alder. So it was a little bit of a surprise, and it happened way sooner than we ever expected to do a timber harvest. But we were able to pay for the bridge and get access to our property. One of the things that has been really wonderful about managing our land, we've been doing it now for about 20 years. We bought the first 40 acres back in the 90s with another couple, and we had thought about becoming middle-aged hippies and living off the grid. And well, fortunately, that didn't work out too well. So we decided to stick with forestry. And when we found out that we could reduce our property taxes, we were paying over $3,000 on that 40 acres. And when we put it in designated forest land, our taxes went down to $87 a year. So that was a nice reward. But in working with Kirk early on, and also with DNR and with the Natural Resource Conservation Service, we've been able to get a series of grants over the year that help us, defray some of the costs. Fortunately, we're in a position where we're not really forced to do harvest to make ends meet. I'm pretty good at having my expenses greater than my income with the Internal Revenue Service. But it really gets a lot easier just to manage the land, knowing that I can talk to Kirk and other people at NNRG in combination with small forest landowner office at DNR, and in conjunction with the Natural Resource Conservation Service.
Thanks, Paul. So, one thing I had hoped, and I think my camera just blinked out here, but that I'd hoped you, there we go, would have shared with folks. But Paul is a master at tree cage design, and following his exploits in keeping deer from browsing newly planted seedlings. And given his credentials as a former professor at Evergreen, I'm still waiting for the day that you write a white paper on deer cage design. So, Paul, that's on you. And we, the rest of the community here really needs to learn from your. We benefit to learn from your wisdom. So,
all right. Well, we could schedule a workshop someday.
Right. Well, thanks for sharing. So we're going to move now to NNRG's largest member, Seattle Public Utilities, in the Cedar and Tolt River watersheds. We've invited Jacob Oberlander, of the foresters for SPU, to join us and talk about some of the very innovative forestry they're doing in the massive municipal watershed. Jacob, we'd love to hear from you.
Thanks for having me, Jacob Oberlander. I'm the forester here for Seattle Public Utilities. I manage the Cedar River watershed and the Tolt watershed. In conjunction, there are 100,000 acres, give or take. So yeah, keeps me busy. Can you guys see that?
It's coming up.
All right. So yeah, again, Jacob Oberlander, forester with Seattle Public Utilities. Thanks for having me. So today I just kind of want to give a brief overview of kind of how we manage the watersheds. It's primarily for ecological reasons. We're not allowed to make money on our timber sales. We don't do it for economic gain. We do it strictly for ecological purposes. So we do a lot of restoration thinnings, habitat thinnings. We do a lot of wildfire risk mitigation around our critical infrastructure. So yeah, various ecological reasons. So for those of you who don't know where we're talking, basically the South Fork Tolt and the Cedar River watershed. So the South Fork Tolt is about 8,300 acres, and the Cedar River watersheds, right around 90,000. So I like to pad my stats and round up to about 100,000 acres here. So we serve about 1.6 million people for drinking water for the city of Seattle. That's kind of who we are in a nutshell. And we've recently adopted a forest management plan. And so this encompasses the Cedar River watershed. We have our own forest management plan for the Toll. So they hired me back in November of 2024 to kind of implement this plan and come up with management units. And there was an optimization model that spit out a bunch of, potential active management units. So I'm doing a lot of ground truthing of the model output. But the model, what went into it was these 5 objectives. So first and foremost, obviously, municipal water supply for the city of Seattle is super important. That's our overarching objective: clean, high quality drinking water for the city. Then we have our HCP wildlife habitat objective. So this is basically trying to create late searal forest conditions throughout the watershed. So to kind of help provide habitat for our HCP listed species. So our murrelets, our northern spotted owl type habitat projects. Climate resilience is a third one here, and it's kind of overarching throughout the whole watershed. We're constantly thinking about, where's the climate going? How are these forests shifting? So we're constantly doing planting trials. We've recently experimented with planting some, east side species like ponderosa pine and western larch. We're even experimenting with some Gary oak and some kind of drier, site adapted species that could prove beneficial in the future. Another habitat objective we have is our ungulate habitat objective. The Muckleshoot Indian tribe has hunting rights in our watershed, and they are very hands-on with the game management in the watershed. And so we don't have a lot of early searal habitats. So we're actually going out and creating some canopy gaps and doing some grass seeding and some different types of understory management to try to get some of this early searal forage established. And last but certainly not least is wildfire risk mitigation. So yes, we are on the west side. We have a low frequency, high severity kind of fire regime here, but we are doing some fuels reduction projects on the west side. Again, with that fire regime, it doesn't make sense to do it a landscape level wide, but we are doing it around our critical infrastructure. And it kind of leads me into the next slide here, which is our first fuels reduction project in the watershed. We basically just got done with this thinning project. I've been working on it since I started about 1.5 years ago. So this is the intake from the Cedar River watershed into the pipes that get piped down to the city of Seattle. So this is a super critical infrastructure with the city. The yellow highlighted areas, that was our non-commercial defensible space project where we did vegetation management around all our infrastructure, the dam, there's a hatchery here, various outbuildings. And then after that, we did a commercial thinning, which is the blue shaded area. And this was more of an east side fire prescription where we looked at reducing stand density, increasing space between crowns, basically just trying to make this stand as defensible as possible if a fire were to happen here. And then there's definitely some monitoring and maintenance that we're looking into, knowing this is a west side forest, doing a fuels reduction project. We're gonna need some maintenance. There's a lot of biomass accumulation on the west side. So these east side type prescriptions are gonna certainly need some maintenance and a lot more frequent than the east side. How am I doing on time? A couple more minutes. So this is just a planned project. This is, we're getting ready to submit the FPA permit for this one. This is a variable density thinning. Basically, this is going to hopefully achieve our late searal wildlife HCP habitat objective. So we're doing a VDT over almost 200 acres with various basal area density kind of prescriptions. I think we have a 25, a 30, and a 35% removal over 14 different units, some cable, some ground-based. These are just the FVS model outputs from the stand, and this is a picture of the stand. Basically in the stem exclusions phase, we're looking to stimulate some understory and try to get that multi-strata kind of, structurally diverse stand started. And so, yeah, like I said, I haven't been here that long, but it's been great working with NRG so far. They're really helping us move forward through our FSC certification, and it's been great working with with Kirk and Rowan on that. They're always available, super responsive, and yeah, just looking forward to working more with you guys and learning from every one of you too. It's great to hear all the forest landowner stories, and it's good to know we're not the only ones with holly issues. So thanks again for having me. I appreciate it. Nice to meet you all.
All right, fantastic. Thanks, Jacob. Yeah, always a highlight of my experience to get up into the Cedar River watershed and again look at some of the really cutting edge forestry thinning that you're doing up there. Appreciate you sharing. So we're going to cast our attention back down into Oregon again, near Salem, Oregon this time. Longtime member of NNRG, Zena Forest, and their remarkable steward, Sarah Deumling. Sarah, really glad you could join us this evening, and we would love to hear the latest from Zena Forest.
Okay, no slides, no technology.
That's just great.
So we are a family forest land of just over 1,300 acres east of Salem in a range of hills that divide the Willamette Valley, west of Salem, excuse me, divide the Willamette Valley between the main valley and the West Valley. So it's a north-south running range of hills. And we have the forest that runs along the top of those hills. And it's a collection of many purchases, well over a dozen over the years, of the back 40s of a lot of agricultural land around us that, and another couple that were purchased one after another. And I think the interesting thing about us perhaps is that there's a lot of oak and maple and ash, but particularly a lot of oak. And the oak habitat, as Benton County may have more or less pointed out, that was fun to have a neighbor. Benton's our neighboring county. We're in Polk County. We have probably now close to 50% oak, or hardwoods anyway, counting the maple too. And the fir is struggling seriously on particular aspects. And we're lucky enough at the top of the hills to have every aspect you can imagine. Not very much water, but east facing, west facing, north and south facing, more moist, very dry, good soil, bad soil. It's not boring. It's fascinating. And we were told at the outset, the first purchase was in 1984 by both the Oregon State Department of Forestry and the State Department of Forestry to cut the damn oak and plant fir. And we didn't. My training in forestry was, I was a school teacher for a while and a mom for a long time. I never went to forestry school, but we had German mentors who noticed, for whom oak is a valuable species. And so they said, no, don't cut the oak. And we didn't. And now with climate change, we're very glad we didn't cut the oak. And, but we were up against a problem for the silly reason that we were trying to make a living off of a forest, that we had all this oak and nothing to do with it because there was no hardwood industrial infrastructure in Oregon. And so we sat on the oak for many years and finally, and the other part is that we have between, 2 and 5% of the original oak land, oak forest land and oak savanna that Lewis and Clark found. So it's a very rare endangered habitat. And part of the reason, it's too long a story to tell, that we have this forest is because it has a permanent conservation easement on it held by Bonneville Power. And you may all know, but in case some of you don't, Bonneville Power has destroyed a great deal of habitat in Oregon, and with dams and power lines and so forth. So they have a federal requirement to mitigate for that habitat loss. And in each part of Oregon, the mitigation is for the most endangered habitat, which is oak in the Willamette Valley. So we're under a permanent working forest conservation easement held by Bonneville, with FSC as the screen for our forest management, which didn't really matter because we were already managing, partly as a reflection of the German management practices that we inherited, and partly because we thought it was right, managing above FSC standards anyway. So at one point, in the very late 1990s, early 2000s, I started fiddling around with what can one do with oak, which is another longish story. But I started with flooring, thinking that that was a fairly low-end possibility. And actually, I wanted to know if it could be done, because oak was considered a nuisance species in Western Oregon, and if there was a market. And I found out eventually, with a steep learning curve, that both were possible. It can be done, and Portland is not a bad market for people who are interested in where their products come from and how they're managed. So anyway, I didn't start a sawmill, but when one of my sons finished college and had a year's work at a lumber mill at the coast, a maple mill under his belt, he came home, and we now have a functioning hardwood mill. Basically, I mean, it sounds arrogant to say it, but there really wasn't any market for hardwood products. And I had lots of highfalutin plans about what I was going to accomplish 40 years ago, but I wanted to give oak a value so people would stop cutting the remaining groves of oak to put in more hazelnuts and vineyards. And I thought, well, if we can buy oak logs from people, then maybe they won't cut them down and look at them as an asset instead of a liability. And in the meantime, we have a sawmill, and I probably have used up my 5 minutes. Our recent project is that we put the floor in the airport renovation in Portland, which gave us a lot of good publicity. And yeah, we're still working on the two big problems of how to stop the destruction of the remaining oak habitat and how to make a living. Those are still out there. We're working on it. But NNRG, I feel like I'm in the diaspora, but Richard Pine and Benton County made me feel slightly less diaspora-like. We always like it when Rowan comes because someone to talk about trees with. And yeah, it's been a fine relationship, but not as close, I think, as some of you have with Kirk, and we're too far away. And yeah, maybe that's enough about us. We do cut fir trees and sell fir trees. We do both. And we do lots of conservation projects, which always cost more than I thought they were going to cost. And I have to get up at 5:30 in the morning to meet a crew. So that's us.
Thanks, Sarah. No, that's great. I put a link to Zena Forest products in our chat there. If folks want to check out their website and the absolutely remarkable range of hardwood products that they produce. So, yep, I do need to make my way back down to Salem again soon, Sarah, to see you and your wonderful forests.
You know anyone who needs a floor?
I'll send them your way.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're going to bring our attention back up to the Puget Sound, and this time bring another forest owner type that's a member of NNRG, a land trust this time, specifically the Great Peninsula Conservancy. And I'd like to introduce Adrian Wolf, Stewardship Director for the Great Peninsula Conservancy. Adrian, would you care to share some of the also very, very innovative forestry that you're doing?
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Sure can.
I'm challenged when it comes to audio stuff. Oh, everybody's frozen right now.
Oh,
Okay, great.
we can hear you.
And I did produce a little screen as well. So can you see that?
Yep, it's up.
Oh man. Okay, great. So yeah, Great Peninsula Conservancy, we're a land trust, and what a land trust is we conserve important ecologically important areas. It's first, let me mention that Paul Butler, it's been so long, I haven't seen you in so long, and I took a class from Paul while I was doing my grad work at Evergreen. Anyway, I'll touch base with you later. But yeah, I'm the stewardship director of Great Peninsula Conservancy, and our mission is to preserve, protect important open spaces forever, and also engage the public or connect people with nature. And this is our conservation legacy. We work in 3 different counties, almost all of Kitsap County, with the exception of Bainbridge Island. They have their own land trust. And then the western portion of Pierce County, so extending all the way to the tip of Devil's Head, and then Mason County, northern Mason County. And we're starting to now acquire some properties on the west side of Hood Canal. We've got our first property in the Skokomish River Valley. But essentially, this is our legacy. We've protected over 12,000 acres. We don't own all of these, or not all of these on conservation easements. A lot of these properties were protected because they were assists for the county, for Kitsap County, or for Penn Met Parks, things like that. But of these, we do own about 4,000 acres, about 141 properties. Half of them are conservation easements, and the other half are fee lands that we own. And Kit, who's on the call here, we hold one of the conservation easements on Kit's property, which is a lovely piece of property. I am not a forester. My background is in ornithology, and so, but I can speak a little bit to forestry, and I'm learning so much from working with Jarl, having worked with Jarl and Chase and Kirk over the years, and Rowan and the entire staff. Fantastic folks. So yeah, so my job as the stewardship director is to make sure that the conservation of our portfolio, the conservation easements, as well as our preserves that we own. And then I have the opportunity to implement conservation practices on the fee lands that we own. And we have relied on an NNRG to assist us with developing forest management plans, for implementing the FMP prescriptions, as well as. Is everybody hearing me okay? You're all
Yes,
frozen.
sure are.
Okay, great. Yeah, and so and I think something unique or special about our properties is that there's incredible diversity across our forested stands, and not all of them are wonderful. This is a recent 400 preserve that we acquired last year. That's the Divide Community Forest, and it's a clear-cut stand with a lot of Scotch broom that's across the property. Northwest Natural Resources Group has helped us develop a forest management plan in collaboration with a botanical inventory that we worked with another contractor. But yeah, this is this is one of my. Oops, sorry. Probably 10 years before that, this is what that stand looked like before the former landowner clear cut it. This is our desired future condition for that property is, these late serial stands, which I think everybody on this call is probably interested in, or most people. And this is less than 300 meters away from that former slide of the Scotchbone infestation. This is a forested peat wetland with 300 to 500-year-old Sitka spruce, western hemlock, and cedar. It's a lovely spot. Actually, when you walk through the stand, we call it the Troll Grove. The land is spongy. There's sphagnum moss out there, and it's essentially just a big marshy pit. It's fantastic. So yeah, so that's something so unique about our forests, is that there's incredible diversity. We have riparian forests that are salmon bearing. We have a farm with beavers on it that we're trying to figure out how to restore habitat and not just feed all the beavers. So Paul, I'd love to tap into you to figure out how we don't just give the beavers a cornucopia. And most of our lands are forested uplands, but we do have some forested wetlands, as this image shows. A recent project that we've undertaken, which NNRG is a member, is this Listen Up Collaborative. And this is a program that is funded or supported by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. They have a program called the Land Trust Bird Conservation Initiative. And for the last 4 years, they've provided funds to help us achieve these three primary objectives, which is habitat improvement, acoustic monitoring, and then sharing what we learn with not just our collaborators or the 7 members of this collaborative, but also with the larger community. So me chatting with you folks today is part of that. That objective number 3 is to share what we've learned. So the collaborative is made up of 3 land trusts, so GPC, Great Peninsula Conservancy, Jefferson Land Trust, and then Bainbridge Island Land Trust. And then we also have some tribal partners, the Jamestown Sklallam Tribe and the Point No Point Treaty Council. And Dylan Bergman, the wildlife biologist there, is working with the Port Gamble Sklallam Tribe as well. And then Kitsap County, we work with Kevin Cedar, who's the forester with Kitsap County Parks, and Irene Weber. And so this is our working region right here. These are all the areas where we've implemented or are implementing forest management work. But a subset of these, we're actually also using birds to figure out whether our actions are working. Are we having a background in ornithology? Birds are very noisy, they're super loud, they're easy to detect, and it's a really good tool to gauge whether your actions are working. So just to talk about some of the management work that we've done. This photograph on the right-hand side is a gap cut to implement, I think it's 2022 now. And we sold some of those logs. It was the first time ever that GPC had ever got an FPA, had ever sold any logs. We thought it was going to be super contentious with our members, but we sold the story well about how important it is to create some heterogeneity on the landscape. So that's that right here. We've also created habitat features, constructed logs as well. And then we've also girdled over 900 trees across about 6 of our properties. And girdling is a process where you're creating a standing snag, which is important for birds. This is just a photograph of what one of our overstocked Douglas fir dominated stands look like before we thinned it, about 250 or so. The understory is finally being reinitiated, and we have some bird monitoring plots out there to detect those changes. So here's an image of some of the conservation work we've done at our Grover's Creek Preserve. This is 300 acres. And these hatched lines right here are gap cuts. We created 6 of those, ranging from size from 1 to 3 acres. And the yellow hatch are our thinning units. This is where we sold some logs. And then the small circles, the colored circles are these snags that we created, or we're creating through girdling. And we girdled across size classes and across species, understanding that the conifers are going to stand longer relative to the hardwoods. And then these larger circles here, the oranges and the greens, these are my bird monitoring plots where we put out these remote acoustic monitoring devices. They're essentially little data loggers that record sound prior to the treatments. And then I've been collecting, I was out there this morning, redeploying these units out there to see how the bird community is changing. It's a fantastic tool. It's much cheaper than paying a biologist to stand out there and then, and having confidence that they can hear what they're supposed to be hearing. With these devices, this data is there forever. We can revisit it in 10, 20 years and run different analyses on it. So this is what these devices look like. They're about 3 inches wide. They're about $89 each. And you can pre-program them depending on your question, whether if you're interested in the breeding bird community, you could just look at the morning song. If you're interested in the wintering or the migratory animals, the near tropical migrants, you can program them to record different times of the day, depending on your question. So we've deployed many of these. We've collected over 500,000 1-minute files. And I just hired a data scientist who's helping us use some software. Essentially, they're sound classifiers. Like if you have Merlin, essentially that's what it's doing. It's these software that can tell you what birds there are out there. So, and this is what it looks like. When we download the data, this is a program that we're using called Arbomon. And it's essentially a sonogram that appears on a screen. And this is how Merlin works as well. It's a pattern recognition software. And so that signature right there is the trending trill of the Swainson's thrush. And you can see that just by looking at it, you can see how that, it's frequency over time. So this is, the pitch of that song that's essentially drawn on a screen. And then so that's the Swainson's thrush, and then this other signature right here, the little dog whistle of the western flycatcher. And so what we can tell the software is to say, hey, this is what a Swainson's thrush is. Go mine through the 500,000 files and tell us where the Swainson's thrush is. And then if these animals, these are our target species, if these animals aren't showing up in these areas where we expect them to do with our conservation practices, then we know we need to do more. If they are showing up, then we know, hey, look, we've achieved our ecological objectives. Anyway, more than 5 minutes, I know. That's my story. And just to talk about NNRG, just being able to tap into experts like Kirk and other NNRG personnel to help achieve our ecological objectives is so fantastic. We couldn't have done this FPA without their support, and then also understanding what funding opportunities there are. There are a wealth of resources through the climate smart commodities. I know that was seized, but things like that and NRCS. Thanks for the invite, and I've taken lots of notes about it. I may reach out to the folks who have already spoken, so thank you so much.
You bet. Thanks, Adrian. Yeah, really appreciate it. And just absolutely fascinating, the bird research that you're doing, a truly pioneering work here in the Northwest. So we're going to keep our attention in relatively the same area here, roughly Gig Harbor, and we're going to shift to one of our flagship members of one of our board of directors, and also somebody I'm going to have a wonderful opportunity to go meet with tomorrow in Walker Woods. Kit, would love to hear from you and the legacy of your family forest that you've been stewarding for, well, pretty much your entire life.
Pretty close. Then everybody else did a lovely job of presenting your story in a very conversational way. I wrote mine down because I'm grimly determined to get all sorts of facts to expose you to. So you can give me high signs if you want me to just change the topic, go to the next paragraph. And unfortunately, I need to read it to have any speed at all. So my name is Kit Ellis. I live on the Gig Harbor Peninsula between Gig Harbor and Rosedale to the west. That's sort of a cue to look at Google Maps and look for the green patch of about 185 acres. That's the victory. My late mother, Phyllis Todd Ellis, bought this nearly 200 acres in 1956 with the $40,000 she received for the taking by eminent domain of her farm in New Jersey. She was told originally it would be just a slice through her property for routing the Garden State Parkway, but the designers decided to build a performing arts center in a park, leaving her only 9 acres on the highway. She gave it to me and I sold it. My mother worked with the late Don Theo, a DNR forester, some of you may remember, and Ruth Milner, a biologist at Washington Fish and Wildlife, who wrote the first management plan. And this property was named the first stewardship forest in Washington. It received its tree farm certification from the American Tree Farm System in 1962. I was still in high school. And aside, I renamed the property the Ellis Family Forest to honor both my mother and my late father, who went missing in action near the end of World War II. I was born 2 months later. They had no other children, and Mom never remarried. So I think of my family as linear. Mom wasn't a trained forester, but she was a keen observer of how healthy plants grow. She knew that a diverse forest was inherently, observably healthier than the monoculture plantation clear-cut model. As time came to do estate planning, it was clear that we wanted to protect the land for the wildlife and its habitats. We wrote our own conservation easement document, which laid out the limitations of any subsequent owners would be bound by. Legally binding document must be monitored by the nonprofit or the governmental unit that accepts and holds it in perpetuity. There was no land trust in the Gig Harbor area at the time, but we were fortunate that the Hood Canal Land Trust, agreed to accept the conservation easement, but they asked that we help start a land trust in Gig Harbor here, and that they then transfer the conservation easement to the new land trust. Mom had some limited logging done. Then in the early 90s, we contracted for horse logging. Great fun. After we saw a demo by Jack Rawls and his wonderful percherons, so gentle, so slow. It was clear that the forest would benefit from careful evaluation and work. Mom died in 1995. My former husband, Hugh Stout, and I were in the process of moving to the Key Peninsula, the next one west of the Gig Harbor Peninsula. Now living nearby, it became harder to say that not doing anything was always preferable to risk doing it badly. Short version, I hired a forester who was going to do a commercial thinning. But among other things, he was not concerned that he had to make sure he didn't remove a larger volume of wood than was allowed by the conservation easement. I would have been liable for damages. After I checked with my attorney, I fired that forester and paid him for the time he'd put in. It felt like a close call. I almost lost the forest. 4 volunteer-led land trusts: Hood Canal Land Trust, Kitsap Land Trust, Indianola Land Trust, and Peninsula Heritage Land Trust, the one that we helped start, merged in 2000 to form, as Adrian said, the Great Peninsula Conservancy, known affectionately as GPC. Being able to afford staff has made a world of difference in what could be accomplished. Talk to any of the volunteer-led land trusts, and the envy is immediately, painfully visible. I've been going to all the small forest landowner programming possible for many years now. Some are even held here, literally. DNR, County Conservation Districts, WSU Extension Forestry, Washington Farm Forestry Association, Washington Tree Farm Program, and of course, NNRG are all great resources. The amount of information and assistance available to us now is wonderful, and their staff work to help landowners take advantage of resources that best fit their goals. Everybody's starting from what is it you want to do with your land, and that's a tremendous change of attitude. Do take WSU's Extension Forestry Coached Planning class if you haven't already. It's terrific. One of Kirk, excuse me, I met Kirk when he came to talk to GPC about carbon credits a long time ago. I'm looking for Kirk's face. I don't know how long ago it was. While I was on the board of GPC, I was reluctant to contract personally with NNRG, even though GPC was and is very successfully using their services extensively. Once I left GPC's board, I've worked a lot with the NNRG. Terrific. One of Kirk's fireside chats a few years ago made it seem worthwhile to deal with the complexities of USDA's Natural Resource Conservation Service and their cost share programs to make it more feasible to do some of the neglected management that was needed. First, I contacted NNRG to have my management plan updated, required to keep the tree farm certification. I often say it's like finally taking a freshman forestry class I never took in college. Next step was to contract with NNRG to carry out work that the plan advised. It was scary. I hate hearing trees fall, but the results are wonderful. The trees that remain can breathe and see the sky. Does that sound familiar as you take away the trees that are destined to be removed because they're interfering with the growth of the healthy ones that we're trying to favor? I'm trying to grow old growth trees more quickly than Mother Nature can. Did I steal that from Kirk? Yes. I guess so. Make sure you look at NNRG's website often. There's a lot of useful information there. Full disclosure, you'll see I'm the newbie on their board. No bear sighting today, but I took the 8th Western painted turtle hatchling of the year down to the lake, and I heard a bald eagle as I walked back to the house. And that's today's view of the lake, which has already come down a good deal from its high in our March rain. Really bizarre weather. So thank you for your patience.
Thanks, Kit. Yeah, wonderful to hear from you. I'm really looking forward to getting back out on your land tomorrow to walk around with you. So appreciate you sharing. Well, folks, we're down to our final contestant on our game show. The Forest is Right, and I want to introduce our board president, Christine Johnson, who has a wonderful forest up in the north, Puget Sound, the San Juan Islands, quirky little island of Waldron. Christine, we would love to hear from you as our final words of wisdom and inspiration this evening. So thanks for joining us.
This has been it has been so inspiring, and what a revelation. I think that I need to set the stage here this forest I have is the smallest forest. It belongs to my husband, and I did not marry him for this forest because I didn't know he had it when I met him. But it might have been the reason why I married him, because I fell in love with him, but fell in love with this forest at the same time. It's 6 acres. It's the minimum you can have in forestry open space in the San Juan Islands. We are on Fishery Point, and we look across the straits to Canada. Waldron Island is the northernmost little teeny island in the San Juans. It has no ferry, no water, no electricity, nor sewage. Everybody is on their own for their own infrastructure. There's no store. There is a post office. There is a dock, a county dock, and there is a K-8 school with 9 kids. The reason why we have this property is that my husband's grandparents homesteaded Sentinel Island, which is off Roche Harbor, in the 1920s. They came out from Arkansas during the Depression. They'd never been to the Northwest. They wanted an island. And they went to the land office, having written to the land office all the way across the country. And June Byrne later wrote a book called Living High. And it's all about their travels in the San Juans in the 1920s and the homesteading of this island. And it's been republished, so it's still in print. As I listen to people, I think the challenge that I've had since I manage the property is, what do you do when you're going to do a thinning and there's no ferry service? How are you going to get rid of these logs? How are you going to sell them? I did one thinning a couple of years ago, and there was a forester that had brought his mill, and I sold a cut list by someone who wanted to do some building, and he just gave the cut list to my forester, and he did it. And then the person came by and paid him and paid me and took all the cut lumber away. Right now I have about 23 logs of prime saw logs that are stacked on my property, and another 20 logs that are waiting for the person I sold them to have firewood made. I'm trying to find a home for these beautiful logs. They are all grown in glacial till, so they have very, very tight grains because there's not a lot of nutrients in the soil there. I think the most important thing that I can say to everybody here is not only my commitment to the forests but my role as the chair of the board of NNRG. My main commitment is to make this organization as strong as it can be, so it is there for you. I am hearing everybody talk in one way or another about NNRG as a resource. So I feel incredibly lucky, but also incredibly responsible for making sure that this organization stays successful, productive, honest, and fiscally responsible. The board members are amazing, quite a variety of people. My background is in organizational psychology and organizational development. And so I have a special interest in this organization being as good an organization as it can be. I was especially moved by the person who said that they were looking at their legacy planning. And I think of a forest sometimes. You've taken care of these forests for years and years. It's like the family dog. What do you do when you die with the family dog? And one of the things that we are working on right now is to develop some more interesting and useful estate planning tools for what what can be done with the forest besides put it in a conservation easement. And so you've given me new inspiration for that. And I think that's about all I have to say. I have big, beautiful fir trees, Doug fir. I have 3 or 4 huge firs that have big broken tops, almost like redwood trees. They're old. They've got fire burns all over them. They were used, I think, for marking of corners of properties up there. And we have just many families of river otters that are all over the property. And recently, our cousins, this property is about 70 acres altogether, and this forest is 6 acres, and it's on our part of the property. They came out and found this very, very large alder. It was at least 2.5 feet in diameter, and it had this hourglass shape. And they were astounded. They were there working on a cabin. They come back a couple months later, and there's this huge alder with an hourglass shape at its base. And some beavers have moved into the swamp besides this cabin, and there's no inlet to the swamp. I don't know how they figure out they're going to maintain the water level there. It sometimes dries out completely in the summer, but they had to cut that alder down. They were afraid it would drop on their cabin. And so if anybody wants to give us some advice about how you transport a beaver to a place where it can be happier and make a forest, I assume that this is going to be a fish and game project. But these beavers they're not going to have a happy life here in a swamp that is going to go dry in the summer. There's nothing they can do. They're working really hard, but this is not going to work for them. So that's my story, and I am really inspired to hear all of the work that you're all doing, and it just really motivates me to make sure that NNRG is there for you in even more ways than it has been. Thanks for inviting me, Kirk.
You bet. Thanks, Christine. And thanks for bringing us to a close here. Really appreciate everybody joining us and all of the stories that you shared. And we're going to keep these fireside chats going. We're not sure what we're going to do next month. We never really know what we're going to do from month to month, but hope that you join us again. And I'll take each of these stories as inspiration with me this evening. So appreciate you joining us. Thanks, folks, and hope you all have a wonderful evening.